Walk into any dispensary today, and the purple weed is the stuff that costs the most. It's the exotic, the top shelf, the bag people pay extra for just because of how it looks. But rewind 20 years back, and it was the complete opposite. Because back then, if your weed it meant your weed was garbage. It was the stuff nobody wanted. Until one day, a strain came along and single-handedly changed that narrative. This is the story of Granddaddy Purple. So to tell this story right, you have to start with the man behind it, because Granddaddy Purple doesn't exist without Ken Estes. And Ken's road into the weed game was a brutal one. Back in the 1970s, when he was just 18 years old, Ken got into a bad motorcycle accident, which left him paralyzed and landed him in a rehab facility where he was trying to put his life back together. During his time in there, a group of Vietnam veterans introduced him to cannabis for the first time. And now I want to be clear about that, because people get it twisted all the time and say Ken himself was a Vietnam veteran, while that was simply just not true. He was an injured young athlete. But it was the veterans around him in rehab who put him onto it. And that first time he tried it, cannabis gave him something he hadn't had since the accident: a full night of sleep. And that moment right there turned Ken into a believer for life. And after that first time trying it, Ken didn't just become a smoker, he became a fighter. He got deep into the medical cannabis movement out in the San Francisco Bay Area, running in the same circles as legends like Dennis Perron, the guy who helped write California's Proposition 215, the law that made medical weed legal in the state. Which was good for Ken, because Ken opened up his own collective, a place for patients to actually get their medicine. And he paid a real price for it too, because he got raided by the feds and dragged through multiple federal cases all throughout the years. But through all of that hardship he was facing, he kept on going. And in 2003, he introduced the strain that would change everything: Granddaddy Purp. Now, the genetics of Granddaddy Purple are actually a mystery, and there's more than one story to it. The version you'll see almost everywhere is that Granddaddy Purple is a cross of two strains, Purple Urkel and Big Bud. Purple Urkel was largely a clone-only cut that circulated through California for years before most people even knew its real origin, which already tells you something about how old-school cannabis genetics worked. And honestly, that combination explains the plant perfectly, because Purple Urkel is an old California purple strain that brought the deep color, that grape and berry flavor, and the heavy, sleepy indica effect. Granddaddy Purp had and Big Bud is a strain that is famous for one thing above all else: its giant, dense, oversized buds that yield like crazy. So you cross the pretty purple one with the huge yielding one, and you get a plant that looks incredible and actually produces. That's the official story you see being told everywhere. But then there's the story Ken himself tells, which is a completely different story. He said that Granddaddy Purple actually came from a purple cannabis cut he was given by Native American growers up in Mendocino, which is right in the heart of the Emerald Triangle, the legendary Northern California growing region that covers Mendocino, Humboldt, and Trinity counties. He says it was a ceremonial purple plant that was already about 18 years old when he got it. And he described it as so dense that you could roll a pound of it out of the bag like a bowling ball. And in other interviews, he's described the genetics differently, again saying it's a mix of Mendo Purps, skunk, and Afghani. So, which one is the truth, you may ask? Honestly, nobody can say for sure. But what most people agree on is that Ken took whatever he had, stabilized it, and locked in his own phenotype. And like a lot of weed from before it was legal, the real birth certificate is just lost to history. But one thing we do know is that the name came from Ken, and it came out of nowhere. The way he tells it is he was high-fiving his buddy Charlie, hyping the plant up, and just blurted out something like, "It's the Granddaddy of Purple." And it stuck. But that name got so popular that it turned into a problem. Growers everywhere started slapping Granddaddy Purple on any weed that had a little purple on it, whether it was the real thing or not. It got watered down so bad that Ken had to rebrand his authentic line as Granddaddy Purp just to protect the real genetics from all the fakes. Now let's talk about that famous purple color it has, because there's a huge myth attached to it that I want to clear up. A lot of people think purple weed is stronger, that the color means more potency. That's just simply not true. The purple comes from something called anthocyanins. Those are the exact same pigments that make blueberries blue and red cabbage red. They're normally hidden underneath all the green, but when the temperature drops during flowering, the green fades away and lets that purple show through. And this is the part most people don't realize. Science has actually shown that the pigments that make it purple and the chemistry that makes it strong are two completely separate things. In other words, purple weed looks amazing, but the color tells you nothing about how high it'll get you. It's pure eye candy, and Granddaddy Purple has some of the best there is. Because the plant is genuinely gorgeous. It grows dense, chunky, rounded indica buds in these deep purple and violet shades, with bright orange hairs shooting through it, with a thick coat of white frost on top. And Ken had the best description of the smell anybody's ever given for it. He said it smelled purple, and the flavor lives up to it. It tastes like sweet grape and berry, almost like a grape soda or a grape popsicle, with these floral notes over an earthy, hashy base. A lot of that flavor profile comes down to the terpenes, specifically myrcene, which drives that heavy body effect, and the sweet, musky undertone, and caryophyllene, which adds that spicy, earthy depth underneath all the grape. As for the high, it usually tests somewhere around 17 to 23% THC, which isn't the highest number out there, but the effect is no joke. It comes on slow, starts with this dreamy, happy head buzz, and then it sinks into your whole body and pins you to the couch. This is heavy nighttime weed. It's the kind of strain people reach for when they can't sleep, when they're in pain, or when they just want to shut their brain off at the end of the day. That's a big reason it became one of the most requested medical strains there ever was, and why it racked up Cannabis Cup wins that helped cement its reputation early on, when growers needed proof that purple could compete at the highest level. But here's what really makes this strain a legend, because Granddaddy Purple didn't just get popular. It took over the entire market for purple weed and dragged the whole category up with it. And Ken himself will tell you straight up, he didn't invent purple weed. Purple strains existed before him, going all the way back to the Jimi Hendrix Purple Haze days. What Ken did was change the demand. Back then, people thought purple meant broken, so Ken went to war on that idea. He would walk up to people standing in line at other dispensaries and just hand them free nugs of his purple weed. He offered money-back guarantees on it. He basically forced people to see that purple could be the best weed in the room, not the worst. And it worked fast. Because within about 6 months, the biggest names in Bay Area rap were smoking it. Ken remembers E40 and Keek Da Sneak getting onto it early, right as the whole Bay Area hyphy movement was blowing up, where smoking purple was woven right into the music and the culture. From there, it just exploded. Granddaddy Purple showed up on the TV show Weeds. It showed up in the movie Pineapple Express. Snoop Dogg named it as one of his favorites. And purple weed became a status symbol. this premium exotic thing that people would pay top dollar for just because of how it looked. In Westcoast rap, perp became slang for the best weed you could get, and Granddaddy Purple was the face of all of it. And the legacy this plant has is absolutely massive, because Granddaddy Purp became apparent to a whole new generation of famous weed. Its most famous child is Purple Punch, which is Granddaddy Purple crossed with Larry OG, and Larry OG itself is descended from the OG Kush lineage, so you have this deep California genetics family tree running through all of it. The story there is that a grower actually traveled to Washington and got a male Granddaddy Purple plant straight from Ken himself to make it, which later led on to Purple Punch becoming a superstar strain in its own right, spawning even more famous strains after it, like Slurricane, Mimosa, and Wedding Crasher, all trace lineage back through that Purple Punch connection, which means they are all living in a world that Granddaddy Purple originally built. Ken made his own crosses of it too, though, such as Candyland and Ken's Kush. But I do want to clear up one common mix-up. There's a strain out there called Grape Ape, and it often gets lumped in as a Granddaddy Purple descendant, and it's not. It's more like a cousin. Grape Ape is Mendocino Purps crossed with Skunk No. 1 and Afghani, a similar purple family tree, but Granddaddy Purple isn't its parent. But as for Ken Estes himself, his health took a hit and forced him to step away from the industry for a while in the mid-2010s. But he's been making a comeback, now calling himself the Perp Daddy, still running his seed line and keeping the original Granddaddy Purple genetics preserved in a lab to keep them clean and alive for the future. So the man who made Purple famous is still protecting his legacy. So at the end of the day, Granddaddy Purple is the strain that changed the color of weed forever. One guy in a wheelchair, who found cannabis at the lowest point of his life, took a color that everybody was scared of and turned it into the most wanted look in the game. He didn't invent purple. He made the world want it. And every purple strain sitting in a jar today, every grape-flavored exotic on a top shelf, is living in a world that Granddaddy Purple built.